Are you looking to buy a new home, but you have a home already that you need to sell? Well, in this video, I'm going to be walking you through that entire process step by step with the pluses and minuses involved in the options that you have. If you've never done this before, it seems like an easy proposition, right? You put your house up for sale, you find the right buyer. Once you find that right buyer, you go out and you buy another house, put a contract on it, and then you swap and you're good to go. Unfortunately, typically it's not that easy, especially depending on the market that you are in. So I'm gonna take some time today to walk through the process and really show you what your options could be as a home buyer and as a home seller. My name is Sean Burke and I'm a realtor in East Orlando. I make sure to mention where I am because real estate is local. Your market in Boise, Idaho or San Diego, California might be drastically different. It's not only important to know the location of the market that you're in, but the actual market that you are in. So are you in a buyer's market or are you in a seller's market? If you are in a buyer's market, good news, this actually may not be as hard as I'm making this out to be. It still will have a lot involved in the process. However, you might have a little bit more options on the table for you. First things first, what is a buyer's market? What is a seller's market? And how do we actually even measure that? So a buyer's market is when there are more sellers than there are buyers. In other words, the demand is right around here and then the inventory is right here, or the supply. So simple supply and demand economics. When you have a buyer that has a lot of options to buy, well then it's a lot harder to sell in that market. And since it's harder to sell in that market, houses typically stay on the market longer. So that's really how we measure what a buyer's market and a seller's market is the inventory. Now, what I mean by that is the inventory is if you were to not put another house on the market right now, you stop it. But then you sell the rest of the houses that are already listed at the current rate. That's the really specific part. It's at the current rate that you're at right now. However long it takes to get rid of all of that inventory is how many months of inventory you have. So let's take for an example in a buyer's market. In a buyer's market, we said the supply was high. So the supply meaning 7 months of inventory or more. That's going to be a buyer's market. A seller's market is the exact opposite. So a seller's market is that you have more buyers than you do have inventory. So actually we're gonna switch that, right? So we have more buyers than we have inventory. So when that's the case, you have more demand than you do supply. Now you're in a seller's market. Now what is a seller's market as far as inventory goes? Well, if you are at 6 months or less in inventory, you are in a seller's market. So really that just leaves the little in between. So 6 to 7 months, that's actually considered a balanced market. With all that being said, what is the ideal situation? The ideal situation is that you can buy your next house without having to sell your previous house. Now, that doesn't mean that you're never going to sell a previous house. It just means that you're going to sell the house after you buy your new house. So you could take that money and you can pay off some debts, or you can put it in savings, or you could just put it towards the principal of the next house or your down payment. That's really going to be up to you. One thing you want to keep in mind though, is that if you are going to put that into the principal, you want to do what's called a recast. Now, I'm not a mortgage professional, but I could tell you enough to be dangerous. So a recast is when you take a large sum of money and you put it towards the principal of your house. Now, meaning you already have gotten into your new house, you're gonna take the payment from the old house and then you're gonna put that towards the principal. Now, you could do that normally without calling it a recast, but what the recast does is that it actually changes your payments. So if you were just to put it towards the principal, your payments aren't gonna change. However, if you do a recast, your payments will change. But again, I would say refer to a professional in that case. The hard part is that not many people are going to be able to qualify to buy a home when they already own a current home. The reason why is that it's called a DTI, or debt to income ratio. So how much debt are you taking on for how much income that you have? So debt to income ratio, DTI. Now for most people, DTI would be too high to carry 2 homes, which is what you're going to have to do in the beginning if you're going to do this method. You're gonna have to keep the old home and buy a new one. So can your salary, income, whatever you wanna call it, can that support both households? Typically, it can't. Typically, the bank says, whoa, your DTI is way too high. It's too much of a risk. We can't allow you to buy that next house. And that's really the bank protecting their own funds because they know if something happens to you, they have to get covered by both houses. So their investment needs to be solid. Even if your debt to income ratios are what they're supposed to be to get to the next house, well, now you got to worry about the down payment and the closing costs. So down payment's gonna typically cost you about 5 to whatever percent you want, but you gotta have a minimum of 5%. So 5% of the purchase price of the home. The next part is gonna be your closing costs. So that's your loan cost, your tax fees, your doc stamps, those kind of things. Now in Florida, it's typical to have around 2 to 3% of your closing costs from your purchase price. So right there, you have about, let's just say on the lower end, 7% that you have to come up with on top of having the DTI that you need to have. Now you're starting to see why this is a tough proposition in trying to buy a house and keep the other house until you're ready to sell it. Since we were talking about mortgages and recasting and that kind of thing, I really want to say to absolutely make sure that you get a pre-approval with a mortgage professional that you know and trust. You may think, I've already bought a house before. I know how this works, Sean. Like, this is not a big deal.
I'm sure I'll be qualified. I'm making more money than I was making before, so of course I'm qualified now.
I will tell you that is a trap. And the reason why I say it's a trap is because sometimes you don't realize how much your bills and your debt builds up as you're getting more and more income. So it's really important to make sure that you have all of your numbers in and really have a mortgage professional looking at those numbers and seeing what it's gonna cost you on a monthly basis moving forward. My biggest suggestion in this is to really make sure you know how much you wanna spend each month. Then you could work backwards and find out what that purchase price actually is. So then you'll go out and look at houses in that range. The reason why I say this is super important is because if you look at homes that you are pre-approved for and then you see the payment, man, is that a shocker. And on top of it, now your whole vision as far as what the house should be is gonna be completely thrown off because you're looking at a house that may be $100,000 cheaper than the houses that you're looking at now. So now your standards are already at a certain level, which is gonna be really tough to overcome. So since we talked about the monthly bills, what does that actually mean? So really what I'm talking about monthly bills when we're talking about a home, it's the PITI. Principal, interest, taxes, insurance. Now here in the state of Florida, that last one, you wanna really make sure that you nail that down as well. There's a lot of ins and outs in insurance, and your local realtor will be able to walk you through what's gonna be acceptable and what's not. What I mean by that is, how old is the roof? How old's the AC? Those kind of questions are what the realtor is gonna be asking. And really the reason why they're asking those is because that's what's gonna be on the 4-point inspection that most insurance companies are gonna ask. So 4-point inspection is gonna be the roof, the AC, the electrical, and the plumbing. All of those need to be taken care of. No marks being on that. Then an insurance company will feel comfortable making sure that they could take your money. I would say this is another place where I would talk to an insurance professional. Your mortgage pro is gonna know around what the price is gonna be, but really to nail down exactly what it's gonna be, I would talk to an insurance professional. Here in the state of Florida, there's a couple of things that can throw that insurance off, just like we talked about with the 4-point inspection. Also, are you in a flood zone that's marked A? So if you're in a flood zone that's marked A, that means that you will be required to carry flood insurance. If you're in a flood zone that has an X, X500, those zones, that's gonna be where you're not required to carry flood insurance. However, I will say this with a huge disclaimer. Just because you're not required doesn't mean that you can't have it or should have it. So to wrap this all together, you wanna make sure that you have a budget. You wanna make sure you know around what the insurance costs. You wanna make sure that you're talking to the mortgage pro during this whole process. And really then you're gonna take those numbers, what you're looking at purchasing at that point, that's what you're gonna bring to the local realtor. All right, so you got your net sheet. You've talked to the mortgage pro. You got your pre-approval. You've talked to the insurance guy. You know exactly what your bills are gonna be. You know what your budget is. Now, what are your options? Option one, well, really this is option two because we talked about option one being the ideal, but we're just gonna call this option one. So, and I'm really clumping together two options. I'm clumping together, you can sell and then go into a short-term rental, or you can sell and then borrow or lease the house from the current buyer. That's commonly referred to as a leaseback. Now with leasebacks, they can get tricky. That's not to say that I haven't done many for many clients. However, there are a couple pitfalls that you wanna know about. So a leaseback, one of the big restrictions is that it can't be more than 60 days. The reason why it can't be more than 60 days is because then if you can't take over the property within that time period, then the institution that's lending you the money is now considering that an investment property, not a residential to where you're going to taking homestead in that property. The other thing is a lot of people don't want to lease it back to you for 2 months. They might do a couple weeks or a month, something like that. But getting somebody to commit to 2 full months of borrowing their house, that's a tough sell. That, again, is not to say it's never gonna be done, it can't be done, or anything of that nature. Just want you to know and have realistic expectations when we're talking about leasing back. So let's say you get the 2 months in the lease back. Now you sell your house. Once you sell your house, now you have to go look for the house. And you have 1 month to do so. Why only 1 month instead of 2 months? Well, that's because it takes typically a month to close. Sure, are there mortgage companies and mortgage professionals that can do it in 20 days or 21 days? Absolutely. It is a little bit rushed, but they can make that happen. However, it's not giving you 2 or 3 weeks. It's giving you a week, maybe a week and a half extra. So you have, let's say, maximum 5.5 weeks to find the house that you're looking for. Now, here's the huge negative in that. What if you don't find the house that you really want? Now you're going to have to either extend the lease back, but if we were already at the max, we can't do that with that current lease back. Or you have to go into a short-term rental. So that would be another move, another expense that you would incur because you couldn't find the house that you wanted. Now, if you don't find the house that you wanted and you have the short-term lease, well, a lot of times those could be extended. The one thing that I will caution you on this is that sometimes they have blocks of time that are maybe 3 months out, 2 months out. That landlord has already agreed to rent it out for the weekend or a day or 2 days. So you might have to switch short-term rentals, which let me tell you, I know from experience, it's a headache. However, either situation, you're still going to be looking for another short-term rental. Here's a little sunshine on that, not so great news. If you're in a buyer's market, meaning you have the 7 months of inventory or more, well, that tells you have a lot of inventory. You have a lot of homes to choose from. So the chances of you finding the home that you want to find is a lot higher. So this whole lease back thing is not as risky as it is when you are in a seller's market. We talked about the negatives. Now let's talk about the positives. The biggest positive that you have when you're buying a home that you don't have to sell the other house, the biggest advantage here is going to be that your offer is going to be much better than if you had the contingency to sell. Now think about it when you're the prospective seller. If you're gonna put your house on the market and somebody says, hey, I'm ready to buy this house, but I gotta sell this other house first. Well, that makes it a little bit less appealing of an offer. So that's the time where, you know what? You might have to make some concessions in the contract that you might not normally make. In other words, you might have to have a shorter inspection period. You might have to have a higher escrow and even a higher purchase price. Now, before I say well, I already said higher purchase price, but before I really go into higher purchase prices, what I mean is that there's not as much room to negotiate. Is there room to negotiate if the house has been on the market for 60 days or 70 days? Then there's still room to negotiate in there. However, if they just put the house on the market and you're offering to buy the house with a contingency to sell, the likelihood that the seller will be interested in your offer, not very high. So if you don't have the contingency, you have a little bit more room to negotiate, which if you're anything like me, then you're really excited about negotiating. The other positive is that you're not moving and selling on the same day. So in other words, when you're signing the dotted line to buy the house, you can get your stuff together, move it when you're ready into your new place. Now, you still will probably have some kind of time constraint, but it's not that day. The other plus is that you're not having to buy and sell on the same day. And really what that problem avoids is that typically if you do have to sell and buy on the same day, then you have to pack up all your stuff, get everything together, get your house completely clear and cleaned, at least broom swept, right? For Central Florida, for the as-is contract. Have all of your stuff out of the house, moved into maybe a U-Haul or something of that nature. Then you have to go to the signing table, sell your house. So that's usually typically in the morning. So let's say 10 o'clock in the morning, you're signing the dotted line to sell your house. And then you're waiting for the funds from that house to then be transferred over to your next house, which takes time. Now, Sean, I know you're probably saying you could probably sign a couple days before. However, there have been times where people have had to sign on that day. However, The most important part is that you're gonna have to wait for your funds to be into your account or into the next title company before you can move forward on that next house. And no matter what, you have to be completely moved out of your other house prior to doing any of this. So there is gonna be a time where you're homeless. Now, it's only a short amount of time, but it's the stress in the whole thing that you're actually avoiding. So that's a huge plus on the side of you buying and then selling. So buying first and then renting in some way to sell. This leads me to the second option, which is you're going to buy with a contingency to sell. So that means that you have to sell your house, but only after you're buying the other one. So in other words, you're gonna go under contract for the next house. What does this look like? Well, looks very normal to as far as if you didn't own a home. You go out and you look for a house and you put a contract on the house. The only caveat is that you have to make sure that your house is ready to roll. Meaning that you have to make sure at very least that you've already talked to a realtor, that realtor's organized, has the listing paperwork, has the listing together, has professional pictures taken, and has looked at all the comps in the area and priced out your home appropriately. Now, if you don't have all that stuff organized, just put yourself in the seller's shoes. If you're gonna go up to somebody and say, hey, I wanna buy your house, but I gotta sell this other house, and they'll say, okay, cool, is it on the market? They're like, no. Okay, well, when are you gonna put it on the market? I was like, well, we could take pictures Tuesday and, we could probably have it up by Friday. And your offer is now really not taken seriously. At least that's how I would feel as the seller of the property. Now, some people are gonna be more particular than that. Some people are gonna say, hey, you have to be on the market. So your house has to be on the market prior to putting this contract on. Or even further than that, has to be past the inspection period. Or really the last hurdle that I've seen is that, okay, your house is on the market, it's under contract, it's past the inspection period, and it's past the appraisal period. Now there's just usually a couple weeks or just a short matter of time to where you're gonna actually close on that home. That's gonna give the seller reassurance that, okay, this thing is more than likely going to sell. Now the positive here is that this is the least risky for you as the buyer out of anything. You're protected if you can't sell your home. If you can't sell your home, you can have an out of the next contract stating that you're gonna still get your earnest money deposit back and that nobody else is gonna be held accountable for you canceling on the contract. It's not the best resolution, but at least it's a resolution to where you get your money back for your earnest money deposit. The other negative that you might have when you're talking about you have to sell with a contingency to buy is that you don't have as much negotiating power. And we talked about this earlier in the video, to where now is not the time to throw in that low ball offer, typically. That's not to say that you can't throw in a low ball offer or that it's just completely not allowed. That's not the case. However, in most cases, now that you have a sale contingency or a contingency to sell, you're going to have to come pretty close to that price, if not right on the money. Now, you might be able to also negotiate terms which would make it more appealing to the seller. You can have a shorter inspection period and the bigger escrow and those kind of things to where maybe you can negotiate a little bit more on the price. However, there's just a little bit less room to negotiate when you do have that sale contingency. That is a lot of information. So I want to sum up everything. First things first, talk to a local realtor. Then you want to talk to a local mortgage professional. Then go back to your local realtor and then come up with a game plan. Once you have the game plan set, depending on whatever market that you happen to be in a buyer's market or in a seller's market, all the stuff the local realtor should know. Then you can make the best decision possible with the options that you have. If you found this video helpful, smash the like button, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.